Hello, and welcome back to our next session. This panel is near and dear to my heart and my work, which makes sense why I'm going to be the moderator. We're going to be talking about move from policy to action with implementation best practices. And when we think about social procurement implementation, we often talk about a journey, and that journey includes policy playing a key role. But to move from words on a page through to action requires a series of activities that support the change management process necessary to successfully implement social procurement. As we see organizations move from policy to action, what can this journey look like, and what are some of the best practices that support implementation across governments, institutions, and the private sector? So welcome to the stage, the speakers for today, and we will have time for a Q&A, so please add your questions. I'd like to welcome Lisa Myre from the University of Toronto, Rachel Orser from the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo, and Sean Crockett from Clark Builders. Welcome. To kick us off, I'd like to hear from each of you kind of a brief 30-second introduction of who you are and what brings you to this conversation today. So Lisa, can you please kick us off?
Sure, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Lisa Myre, and I'm the Senior Program Lead for the Social Procurement program at U of T. I joined U of T in 2017 as a project manager, and I started working on this program off the side of my desk a few years ago. But as the program has grown, I now have full-time carriage of this program.
Awesome. Love to see that championship progress. Rachel, and you.
Thank you, Tori. Prior to introducing myself, I would like to humbly acknowledge that I'm speaking with you today from Treaty 8 territory, the traditional land of the Cree, Dene, and unceded territory of the Métis. As Tori mentioned, my name is Rachel Orser, and I'm the Director of Supply Chain Management at the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. Since joining the municipality 3 years ago, I have been fortunate enough to lead the implementation of our social procurement program. This built upon foundational work that was performed prior to me joining the organization. This has been a very humbling journey and a wonderful opportunity for the municipality, and I look forward to speaking to you today.
Awesome. Welcome, Rachel. And Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Tori, and hello, everyone. My name is Sean Crockett. I'm Vice President of Corporate Development with Clark Builders. We're a large general contractor based out of Edmonton, Alberta, serving Western Canada and the North. My portfolio is quite diverse. It includes strategic work in marketing and communications, Indigenous relations, which includes building local community vendor capacity. I provide executive support for our North Star Equipment Rentals division, which is often involved in procurement. I also lead our new Source Blue Procurement Services division, and more generally support business and market development plans for growth, including leading strategic initiatives like social procurement. And super excited to be here today.
Well, I'm glad you've made some time with all that on your plate. So when we think about social procurement and the journey, we think about including learning, policy development, measurement, which includes baselines and reporting, and importantly, testing and doing. So we're here to talk about that testing and doing by putting social procurement into practice through pilots and ongoing implementation. Each organization's journey is unique, but we can really learn from each other and from what those different journeys have looked like. So can you please tell me an overview of what the journey has looked like so far in your organization and where in the journey you would currently say your organization is at? Let's start with you, Sean.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I guess it's sort of year one of our formal journey in social procurement. At Clark Builders, our purpose is to enrich the lives of the people who work with us and in the communities that we help build. And we recognize that construction is a local business that is part of building communities. So for us, local procurement and community benefits have always come naturally. But what we've done through this social procurement initiative is to attempt to formalize some of the cultural practices that we already engage in today. We do have a culture of engagement in the company on strategic initiatives. And so in our journey, we established a cross-functional and cross-regional committee, all of whom in this last year have completed their social procurement professional training. And we worked as a group with by Social Canada to become a verified social purchaser. And together as a team, we drafted, discussed, and revised proposed policies and action plans to support our social procurement initiative. And our formalized plan and policy was approved and adopted this summer by our executive leadership team. And now we're into the communications, piloting, and testing stage. I'm sure there will be lots of continuous improvement and learnings ahead. And we continually seek to identify other leading practices with hopes that we can develop the right approach that works for us. So we're really in the piloting and testing stage of a formal approach.
Excellent. And you've incorporated engagement, you've incorporated learning, you've incorporated policy. So you've really touched on a lot of those journey aspects. Great. Rachel, what is the journey for the regional municipality Wood Buffalo look like?
Yeah, it's certainly been an exciting journey, Tori. As I previously mentioned, we commenced this journey prior to me joining the organization. But to me, that really illustrates our commitment to social procurement. So in 2016, we had developed a social procurement framework, and it was being tested on a pilot basis. However, due to a natural disaster, momentum at that time was really postponed. So then in 2019, we posted a public opportunity through competitive procurement where we looked for somebody to partner with to advance our program. And fortunately, we got to work with BiSocial. However, there was a couple of other unexpected events, being a pandemic and another natural disaster, that kind of postponed us again. But we were able to really gain momentum in 2021. When we started looking at the program again, because of the work we'd previously done, we were really fortunate that we had a strong foundation in place that still aligned with our strategic priorities as a region, as well as some of the other plans that we had in place. So given this, we were really well positioned to make a priority putting into implementation a program to reap the community benefits. So to advance the program forward, we established an internal task force, which was to help educate or re-educate, to gather feedback on what the framework looked like and to help look at implementation and what that could look like. Concurrently, we worked with our community partners, being local business associations and their membership, as well as our not-for-profit and social enterprise community, as well as our residents, to hear from them of what was important, just to ensure that we were developing a program that was really fit for our region. The intent of that particular round of engagement with our community partners was to grow the awareness, but also to get feedback and to actively listen so that we were developing a program in collaboration. What we learned from our engagement was that there was overwhelming support to move to implementation. And we recognized we may not have it perfect initially, but as long as we had a commitment to continuously improve, that we could move forward with this. So in September of 2021, we actually adopted or changed, I should say, our policy and procedure to adopt the social procurement program. And we were fortunate that we brought that forward to council and we received the approval. So with that, we had developed an implementation plan that we felt would help to successfully adopt the program. This included detailed plans for communication, training internally and externally, ongoing engagement, as well as a commitment to continuously improve. To help us focus or remain committed to the continuous improvement, we actually developed a social procurement working group, which is comprised of both internal and external stakeholders. And we are tasked with providing each other feedback and taking that input to see if we can continuously improve our program. So we have been able to implement, as I had mentioned, we commenced with piloting a social procurement questionnaire, which was specific to our request for proposals and request for quotes. And we also were able to develop a local business directory or registry, which we wanted to use to prioritize spending locally for low value or below threshold purchases whenever possible. We are, as I mentioned a few times, continuous improvement. We are dedicated to developing and evolving this program as we continue along this journey. And we just really remain dedicated to growing it.
Amazing. Well, I'm hearing lots around engagement being such a powerful tool that's really helped you progress your implementation design and the social procurement journey at the RMWB. And Lisa, how has the journey been for the University of Toronto?
Yeah, so, U of T worked with Mars and Ryerson in the early days to help create what's called the Buying with Impact Social Enterprise Procurement Playbook. And so this has really served as a helpful framework for us that we've used to tailor our social procurement program to really suit our operating model, because U of T's purchasing decision making is decentralized, to leverage our available resources and budget, and also gauge uptake and monitor the program. And from there, we created the business case and obtained senior leadership feedback on that. We identified a multi-stakeholder advisory board. We then identified pilot groups willing to engage in the program. We created a project team from across our 3 campuses. We partnered with several supplier certification councils. We then engaged with Weeby and their IT partner to develop and implement our diverse supplier portal. And then further to that, we developed reports for division to measure their spend and transactions. And we also provided portal training and materials to procurement staff and buyers. So in terms of where we are now, we have several pilots underway. And we've also partnered with BiSocial and are currently conducting key stakeholder engagement sessions to really highlight the current social procurement activities, the opportunities, and the challenges across the U of T community. And this will really help us prepare before the broader rollout in the spring of next year.
Awesome. Okay. So some common themes in each of your journeys, but again, non-linear approaches, and they kind of have different stops, different order. You're kind of suiting them to your organizational context and kind of what's needed when, but really hearing a lot about communication, engagement, talking to the different stakeholders, and training to make sure people understand and can apply the implementation programs that are developed. And Rachel, I just want to do maybe a follow-up question to you. You've talked about a framework being developed in 2016, now the updated program in 2021, moving into implementation. And I think this really shows that RMWB and the community there really sees social procurement as an important thing. Despite some serious challenges coming up, you've come back to this again and again to see how it can really support your community and your community needs. And when you think about the implementation that's happening now, how is that going when it comes to the social procurement questionnaire that you've been putting into pilots?
Yeah, no, thank you, Tori. That's a great question. We identified early on that this would not be necessarily a straightforward exercise or journey. And so as a result, we made an intentional decision to see what we could easily, or more, I don't want to say easily, proactively look to implement while we continue to evolve a program. And so part of that, as you mentioned, was the inclusion of a questionnaire. We did start with some pilots, but since April of this year, being 2022, we've now included this questionnaire in all of our request proposals and requests for quotes as an evaluated criterion. So every job will consider this, which really shows our dedication to the program as well as the importance to the community. How it's going, knock wood, it seems well. However, now that we're 6 months in, we're actually taking that time to pause, to look at the responses, and to perform some analytical work. And the intent with this analytical work, it will tie into our measurements, but it's also going to give us powerful information to share with our social procurement working group so that we can then look at the program and think, is there any tweaks needed to this questionnaire? Is this questionnaire still aligned to what's important to us as a community? So it shows, again, our commitment to continuous improvement, but also understanding and being open-minded, seeing what is important holistically in our region.
That's great. Awesome. And I do think that attitude of continuous improvement is so valuable, and using data to inform that process. Lisa, when you think about the pilots that you're currently exploring at U of T, can you speak to the process and how you've identified relevant pilots and what has been involved in starting to develop what the pilot process will look like?
Sure. So the process really involves a lot of outreach and conversations with key stakeholders. You know, I speak about the program at every opportunity, even during elevator rides. You know, one example that I can really recently cite is that I reached out to the director of First Nations House, who also happens to be on our advisory board, to invite him to one of our engagement sessions. And during that conversation, I found out that he wants to engage with Indigenous suppliers for their promotional materials, but due to the requirements necessary to qualify as a promotional supplier, this has been a bit of a challenge. So we actually met yesterday, so fresh off the press, and we're planning to see how we can best deal with these barriers and assist to secure, Indigenous suppliers for promotional goods. And really, we want to involve all key stakeholders that are interested in this. I know that in previous discussions across the community and through our engagement sessions, I'd heard others talk about this barrier. So, there's some appetite across U of T, the U of T community, for more Indigenous suppliers to provide promotional materials. So we'll bring everyone to the table and have that discussion and see how we can best address this. Another way, that we plan to approach more engagement once we build capacity is by looking at data, in terms of who's buying what from whom. And I think that so much more engagement can come from that. Really, all in all, conducting these pilots is providing us with the knowledge to establish processes and be prepared, once again, for the broader U of T community rollout next spring.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And on your first story there, I think you really hit on what we've been seeing in the chat around gifts and swag being a big opportunity area, but then also on the relationship building piece and talking to suppliers and coming together to have conversations and not just be, here's an RFP. If you don't fill it out correct, then you're not going to get the bid. So those additional steps that are needed. Awesome. Sean, in our work with Clark Builders, we've been working with the internal advisory and champions committee that you've established. Can you expand on the process of putting this committee together and why you think having the committee in place has been important for Clark Builders and your implementation of social procurement?
Yeah, sure. Well, as mentioned, when we started the initiative, the formal initiative around social procurement, we struck a cross-functional and cross-regional committee internally to ensure that we had broad input and insight into the plans. Each member of the committee touches social impact in some way in their own role and contributes their perspective. So it's well-rounded. And our process was also one of consulting with peer organizations on similar journeys to share practices, research leading practices with Biosocial Canada and other sources, and develop straw dog models for our teams to discuss. This process allowed us to move forward beyond policy and plans to look at the challenges and opportunities of implementation, which was often the biggest focus of conversation of the committee. How are we going to do this and who's going to lead what? And so the process of having a committee really ensured a collaborative framework rather than a top-down process. And by contributing to the creation process, our members became authors and owners that can champion our social procurement mission in their respective parts of the organization. We also want to ensure that we continually seek to understand and improve our approach and ensure broad buy-in through the company. So those individual committee members then become champions in their respective parts of the organization to take what we've done of incubating strategy and rolling it out throughout the company, cascading it.
Wow, I'm going to get the transcript from that because I think you've just explained so well why having multi-stakeholder working groups is so impactful. Social procurement is multi-departmental, multi-sectoral, and breaking down barriers and silos to have that communication helps make a more robust program, but then also helps to inspire champions. Fantastic. So I've got a couple of questions in the chat already, and I'm curious, we've talked about champions here. And there's one here. Did any of you have any unexpected supporters or advocates during the social procurement journey? If anybody has any response, feel free to chime in.
Well, I can say right off the bat that certainly one of our committee members in particular was from our estimating department. You could see right away that he was super engaged in the process. He was passionate about this, and it was something he'd been seeking for in our organization, as how can he take what he does in his daily role in his job at Clark Builders, but tie it to his passion of helping build capacity with local vendors and local communities. So right away, we just really saw, in particular, one of those members just, the lights really went on, and it was so great to bring that energy and enthusiasm to the table.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of some stories we've heard in the past about people working in procurement. It can be seen as this kind of number crunching role, but when you start to recognize that you can really make a difference in your community, that can be really inspiring. And I remember Mayor Lisa helps calling her procurement staff the change makers, because it's a mantle that you can take upon yourself and recognize that social procurement is a way to create change and impact in community. Lisa or Rachel, anything to add to unexpected advocates or champions?
Well, I think I can chime in just for a moment. Sure, during our key stakeholder engagement sessions, it was really nice to see the folks really engaged in providing feedback for the program, because it's really a program that the U of T community will use. Within procurement services, we're providing the tools and the resources and hopefully some guidance in terms of this program, but it's really for the people. So it's really kind of nice to see the early adoption as well from our pilot groups when we first started talking about the project.
Great. Rachel, anything from you?
There's no single individual or organization that sticks out. I think what amazed me, and it's probably because I wasn't there for when that foundational work was laid, I feel like I was the person coming to the table with so much to learn, and I just was very humbled by what the community was teaching me, as well as my colleagues, and how excited everybody was just to move this forward into implementation. So no single individual, but I think it was more inspiring as a region to see how excited we were to move forward.
Yeah, I remember being really impressed by the community advocacy from the different business associations, Chamber of Commerce, Construction Association, who were really pushing and saying we need to get back to this. This is really important. And that's, I think, incredible to see, because we do want to see community advocating for social procurement, bringing that to the table and engaging with elected officials, and then the government's really putting that into action. So I've got a tricky question here, I think, and I think it's a bit of a crux. So we haven't reviewed this before, so you feel free to take a minute to ponder, but I think it's a really interesting one. How did you facilitate the paradigm shift required to implement and operationalize a social procurement policy? And I think this ties into that idea around change management. What are the supports needed, and what have you seen work for that transition in your organization? Feel free to unmute, or go ahead, Sean.
I guess I can go again, because this is something we actively encountered, and it's always that fear of, we're introducing something new. Now there's going to be something new required in everybody. We've added more to jobs, and we really started the conversation around, tell us about how you operate in your role today, and how you engage with community. And there's all sorts of great stories. And we said, what, really all we're doing, we just want to capture that. We just want to make that a part of our culture across the board, because it already is today. And so it was really more about formalizing something we already do. And in that way, we were able to sort of take the fear away of something new. That doesn't take away still the challenge of implementing it on a broader scale and setting goals and measuring yourself towards bigger goals. But at least it sort of helped people get around the concept of change of, well, wait a minute, this is what we already do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel?
Yeah, I think for us, it was engagement. We started early before we talked to our community partners. We went back at numerous touch points, and we really created champions within the business who could help spread the word and make their team more aware. Through that, we were able to, much as Sean mentioned, conquer some myths. We already do some great things, so let's just take it to the next level. And then engaged again on training. We created protocols to help, and just as a procurement team, always made ourselves available when anybody in the business had hesitation. So it was just open dialogue, and a lot of dialogue, but it's paid off.
Great. Any thoughts from you, Lisa?
Yeah, we haven't, so we don't have a policy in place, but it is something that we're looking at. A lot of discussion around that. But essentially, it's just really reaching out and engaging with a lot of people. And, you know, with our advisory board and senior leadership, there's a lot of talk, you know, across the various faculties and departments. And that's kind of really where we're getting a lot of traction. And you know, hopefully, you know, we get a solid foundation for this program, and then we'll take a look at whether or not policy is required.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And I've got a question for you in the chat. So I'd like to maybe move the conversation to thinking about the tools that have helped support the implementation journeys of your organizations. And this question for Lisa asks, is the diverse supplier portal you have developed open to social enterprises as well as other diverse suppliers?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So the diverse supplier portal was developed with two kind of databases inside of it. One of them is the certified suppliers from the Supplier Certification Councils, and the other side of it is what we've developed is a questionnaire. You know, that's fairly straightforward to fill out and asks a few key questions in terms of who you are as a business. So that way, when our buyers access the system and they just type in goods and, you know, whatever goods and services they're looking for, they'll either pick up the certified suppliers and also the self-registered suppliers, and then they can take a look and, you know, get at least one quote from a diverse supplier is what we're kind of recommending. But absolutely, yes.
Great. And I have another question about tools for Rachel. This question says, I am interested in understanding what are the types of questions in the RMWB questionnaire. And Rachel, maybe you can speak to the landing page too that you've developed.
Oh, Tori. I'll put the address in the chat later, or you could just...
One of our team can get the address.
Yeah, our landing page, sorry. So we developed a landing page, and this was something that we heard through our ongoing engagement and outreach and part of change management, but more on the external side. This is new, and it could be overwhelming. So we decided to create this landing page, and what that page does is it really highlights the program itself, what we're trying to achieve, and some of our key tactics under it. So that will be shared. It's a great tool as well, because included in there, we actually have an overview of the program as a document, as well as our questionnaire. So without getting into the specifics of every question, what we did is we really looked at the social value objectives to our organization and then created questions surrounding that. So for example, we wanted to look at economic development and business diversity, as well as supportive employment, skills development, and inclusive hiring. So those are kind of the headers that we structured our questionnaire under. And then there's a few questions under each part of that questionnaire that one becomes evaluated on. And it's important to note, when we developed this questionnaire, part of the feedback was to ensure, you know, you only have a certain amount of time already to respond. So we wanted to ensure that we didn't add more to that response time or more work to a potential respondent or proponent. So the questionnaire itself is actually posted on that landing page that we mentioned. And until we do a review from a social procurement working group, it remains the same, so that potential respondents or proponents know what they're going to be asked and they can prepare for it. But more importantly, they can build on that too. If they know there's somewhere they're not going to score, but it becomes important to their organization as well, they can make sure that they have their own policy or program or reporting in place to help them with that aspect of the questionnaire.
That's great. Thanks, Rachel. And that questionnaire, it was developed using the process that you can find in the BioSocial Canada social value menu. So we'll put the link for that in the chat too. And if anybody is interested in developing that type of model, they can look to that free open source resource is a great starting point. Sean, any thoughts on you on kind of tools and the development of tools for Clark Builders and what's worked and what you learned?
Well, the next phase of piloting is going to be sort of where the rubber hits the road. And that's where, you know, we're engaging the frontline team members in that task, because the ones that are running our projects are the ones that have to develop the tools that work. And so, you know, for us, really working with BioSocial Canada has been a great resource. We've appreciated the consultation, the advice, and the resources that Biosocial Canada brings. And now our job is to really make sure that our frontline team members understand social procurement, understand our objectives as a company, and then together we need to develop those tools because it's got to work for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a great video that we're not going to be able to share live right now, but we'll put the link in the chat. But apparently my panel theme is everyone will have lots of links. But Sean, can you speak to the story around the Red Crow Community College and the success that came from that?
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes, we recently completed the Red Crow Community College with the Kainai First Nation in Southern Alberta. In fact, the opening ceremony is tomorrow. The project was located in a community outside of major municipal centers, so it did provide for lots of opportunity for local labor and service engagement. But it was our first time working in and with the community. And so it took some time for us to fully identify the sources, the capacity, and the sustainability of local solutions. But once we got through those early getting to know you steps, we really found our stride together, working with the community as a partner in the project. And in the end, we had significant local participation in the overall project delivery. And it really helped to develop a strong sense of pride by those participating from the community. And if you take a look at the video, you'll see the feedback that was shared by the community leaders about their experience in that and how that has paved the way for an ongoing relationship. But as I mentioned, this is what we do normally and informally as part of our culture. But going forward, we want to make sure it's purposeful and intentful by having those clearly defined guidelines around social procurement. So very exciting project, very proud for us, and one that the community is very proud of as well.
And I think you had some data on the local labor. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I believe about 55% of the labor hours were sourced locally from the community, which was significant. And for us, that's just a source of pride as well. In fact, seeing the feedback from the community leaders, the vendors, and the staff members that were participated in the project from the community, it's quite emotional for us because it really tells you that you're having a meaningful impact in what you do. And for us, that's about living our purpose every day.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And Lisa, can you share with us a success story that you've experienced at the University of Toronto?
Sure. One of our success stories is with ancillary services, and they were looking to have several different food service locations across the St. George campus. So what we did is we partnered with Women Business Enterprise and conducted a Meet the Buyer event, and that was the first one for us. We issued the RFP. We had it posted on a few different Certification Council websites, another new process for us. And then, and so far, a few of the contracts have been awarded, but we're going to continue to push forward until all the locations are filled. I think for this, the timeline was fairly tight, but we continue to work, and we'll get some culinary diversity across the campus soon.
Great. Rachel, is there a success story you'd like to share from Fort McMurray?
Sorry, I'm just thinking, as we reflect back again on this journey really gaining momentum in 2021, to me, the success is that implementation, that really within approximately 15 months, we were able to build on a foundation that was previously developed, to revalidate it, and to work so closely with our internal as well as our community stakeholders to make sure that it was a program that we could all stand behind once implemented and be proud of. So the fact that we've really transitioned that into the full implementation as of this year is a tremendous success. I don't want to jinx myself, but I think the next success will be now looking back at this data and saying, what should we tweak or how should we tweak? Because as I've mentioned numerous times, continuous improvement is important. And I recall a conversation with a community partner probably a year ago, if not more. saying, wouldn't it be great to get to a point where we had to redevelop the whole program because we got there? So it's just, again, looking at that and continuously tweaking it and improving it.
Excellent. Okay. And then I would love to hear some final words from each of you. Any key piece of advice for anyone in the audience who's thinking about taking their first step into social procurement implementation? Lisa, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I would say, do your research, talk to other institutions. I found that so helpful. Build your business case and, obtain buy-in from senior leadership. Have them look at it. Have them provide the feedback. Develop an advisory board. Meet with them. Continually stay engaged and communicate your successes. It's not a straight line. It's okay to make some mistakes along the way, and really just treat those as opportunities to learn and make the program and processes better.
Absolutely. I think Brianna was saying earlier about tapping into networks, and I just want to make sure if people aren't aware on the call that we do have a national community of practice around social procurement that's free for anyone to join and meets quarterly. So that's a great place to be able to continue these conversations and carry them on. Rachel, any advice for anybody in the audience who is starting a social procurement journey?
Yeah, I have a few points, but it's similar theme to Lisa. I guess the first one is really know what's driving your journey, because this is going to help you stay the course, and understanding that there's going to be many potential twists that you don't anticipate, but really know what's creating that passion and why do you want to achieve a social procurement program, because if you know that, then you'll hold true to that truth in the journey. And as we talked about, it's not going to be a start to finish. You're going to get through one part of a line and then you're going to have more ideas. And that's wonderful and that's great. But I want people to know that this journey can be, it's maybe a marathon, it's longer. There's lots of opportunity. And I think the last one is really to never understand or underestimate that power of collaboration. And similar to what Lisa said, doing the research, reaching out to people who have been successful in a program and to see where they are, what was their lessons learned, if they had their time back, what would they change? But then also what worked really well, and make sure that you can take celebrations of success from other entities and incorporate it into your journey, because that will really help. And then on that whole power of collaboration, when you're working with people, go in with an open mind and be really an active listener. Because you're going to have ideas that are going to come at you from way out in the left field, or it might seem. But once you take that time to sit down and really think about it, I think it can just really contribute that much more to the success of a program. So be open-minded and be willing to evolve as you go through your journey.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Sean.
Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of what Lisa said, particularly around consulting with organizations, peers, clients outside of your organization. We were lucky in that we had strong support from our executive leadership team for this initiative. But I would also, I guess, encourage a highly facilitative and consultative approach internally and working with all of your internal stakeholders. So think very carefully to identify who those stakeholders are, because you might miss out on somebody that can play a key piece in your plan. And one example for us was IT. We were thoughtful and intentional, including our IT department on our social committee, because a big part of this is we have to understand data, track data, measure ourselves, report data, and they became such a meaningful contributor to the overall program. So you really, take the time and effort to think through your stakeholders before you start.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you, Lisa, Sean, and Rachel, so much for the work that you're doing in social procurement and for sharing your experience and knowledge today. Because I think, as you've all said, sharing that, connecting with each other is going to really help us move forward and create impact in communities. There's a few questions that we didn't quite get to in the chat, so I really encourage, if people want to stay on during the upcoming break to continue the conversation, please do. We're going to be taking a little bit of a longer break to stretch, eat, and refresh yourselves. But one other option you could include in that time is is the conversation that came up yesterday. So David asked me what songs I was going to be dancing to in the symposium today. And if you attended our symposium in April 2020, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 1-minute discos, which really added fun and funk to the day. In 2021, for the symposium, we had a great playlist ready to go, but on the day of the event, I ended up in a spiral of music rights, dead ends, and I was calling, people being like, can I pay someone to play this music? Is this okay? So we didn't end up doing it. And this year, sadly, our format doesn't quite drive with shared listening, but we don't have to let that stop us. I'm going to put my social procurement power playlist into the chat. So a fun option is to pick a song and have a little bit of a dance break, either by yourself or at one of the table breakouts. And we'll be back for the last 2 sessions of the day at 12:20 Pacific and 3:20 Eastern time. So enjoy, and we'll speak to everybody soon.
Thank you.